Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. We have a wonderful webinar today here with Talent Collective, and we're honored to have two very, very inspiring guests here today with us. We have Bridget Hilton and Joe Huff, who are going to be speaking about achieving goals and living a life of no regrets. So Bridget and Joe have recently co-hosted a book together called Experiential Billionaire. Everyone's going to want to grab that. And they've worked together for years and years, first by creating a headphones speaker audio product and company. And then by giving people the gift of hearing through their charity and mission work. They've also traveled together to over 50 different countries and helped over 50,000 people. So really, really excited to have Bridget and Joe here today and have them share their stories. Attendees, as you guys are coming on in here today, please feel free to, again, put your name, where you're calling from, your LinkedIn profiles, feel free to connect with each other. I'll also drop Bridget and Joe's LinkedIn in the chat as well once they get started, so you all can connect with them. Real quick, just wanted to, for anyone who isn't aware of what Talent Collective is, we are a community for women in the talent acquisition space. So if anyone's interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to me. Again, very, very big warm welcome to Bridget and Joe, and I'll pass things over to them now.
Awesome. So yeah, thanks for having us. We're excited to be here. I'm Joe, and this is Bridget.
Nice to meet you.
We're going to be taking turns. So Bridget will step off, and then you'll see her again in a little bit. But I just want to make sure you see that Bridget's here with me. It's not just me pretending to be two people. All right. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Some of that stuff is true. No, actually, we're really glad to be here, and we're excited to share this message. And the book and the message isn't about travel and adventure. Those are just things that we love. Our message is about building the most rich and rewarding lives. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So what we're going to do today is share some powerful steps and tools to help you find the urgency and clarity to start to identify and take action on your most important goals, both personally and professionally. Now, you heard some of the bio, but we built companies, we traveled the world, we've helped tens of thousands of people, and we've done a whole lot more. So it might seem like we've figured this all out and our lives are going absolutely perfectly and we're going to live happily ever after. But that's not what's happened. What actually has happened is we've also lost millions of dollars, we've had failed businesses, we've suffered devastating setbacks, and we've gone through extremely difficult mental and physical health challenges, including, sorry, hold on one second, my thing's not synced up, including, get back to the beginning here. My wife, Yasmin, in this photo here, including her sudden and unexpected cancer diagnosis 2 years ago, which came right after the birth of our second son. And I'm going to share a little bit more about her journey later on and how it's affected our lives and what we can take away for you. But I'm going to spare you the suspense and let you know that right now she beat it. She's officially cancer-free, and we're living every day and every moment with extreme gratitude. But if you're wondering why Bridget and I are here telling you our stories today, it's because of things like this. It's because to us, sharing this message that you're about to hear is the most important thing that we can do. And the message isn't follow your dreams and everything will always work out perfectly. No, it's not a bumper sticker. Our message is more of a manual on how to make the most of your time on this planet. So we're going to start off with a couple of stories. And these are stories that we hope will help you start to change the way you think about what it means to be wealthy, which is something I've learned a little bit about the hard way. When I was 27 years old, I had to file for bankruptcy, and I was devastated, knowing I had lost everything and the fact that I was going to have to go around telling people I was bankrupt. But I saw the bankruptcy attorney, and they told me that it cost $5,000 to file for bankruptcy. So not only was I completely broke, I actually had to go around telling people I'd really like to be bankrupt. I just can't afford it. Now, luckily, the story of my wealth, or lack thereof, doesn't end there, because a few years later, I met Bridget, we became business partners, and since then, we've both been fortunate to become very, very rich. But before you ask to borrow any money, you should know that our wealth is in the currency of life experiences. But that's worth more to us than any number in a bank account can ever be, because it's our experiences that become our life stories, not our bank accounts. And thankfully, there's no bankruptcy attorney for our experiences. Money comes and goes, but we get to keep the value we gain from our experiences forever. But this also isn't about money versus experiences. So don't worry, we're not about to tell you to quit your jobs and start hissing at people who own yachts and live in mansions. Money is important, and it's definitely, hold on 1 second, my camera's freezing up, I can see. There we go. Money is important. It's definitely helpful to have more money. And who doesn't love having friends with yachts and mansions? That's never a bad thing. But we are going to tell you that the most dangerous thing you can do is put off investing in your most important goals, dreams, and experiences. Because not only are they the most important thing to invest in, they also directly relate to success in every area of our lives. But how do I know that? Well, I definitely didn't start off thinking like that. Like most people growing up, I just wanted to be rich, not experientially rich, regular old rich, like mansions and Ferraris rich. However, I wasn't inherently wealthy by any stretch of the imagination. I was born into a pretty typical blue collar family here in the Midwest. My parents met on an assembly line making brake pads. I spent my early years on the second floor of this triplex where we lived on the west side of Chicago. And my parents, they both worked a lot, but I noticed not only were there no Ferraris in our driveway, we didn't even have a driveway. So growing up, my closest experience to a trust fund was trusting that my parents would fund the occasional trip to the ice cream truck. And sadly, college hadn't been a viable path to success for me because I barely even managed to graduate high school, which is really strange because when I look back at my high school pictures, they scream out valedictorian. But once I was forced to acknowledge that Bon Jovi wasn't going to bring on any new band members based on hairstyles alone, the lifestyles of the rich and famous seemed like a pretty far off dream for me. But then one morning, right before my 18th birthday, something happened. I came downstairs to discover my otherwise seemingly healthy 48-year-old dad slumped over at the kitchen table. He was white as a sheet and drenched in sweat. He'd had a sudden heart attack, so we rushed him to the hospital. But it turned out it wasn't just a heart attack. He actually had advanced stage heart disease, and his heart was failing. Not at some distant point off in the future, it was failing right then. He was immediately added to the very top of the transplant list, and a few days later, he was put on life support and given very low odds of survival. So we started to prepare ourselves for the worst. And as we watched and waited, I couldn't help but think about all the things my dad had still wanted to do, but hadn't. And as I paced up and down the halls of that hospital, I'll never forget that horrible feeling, thinking that this is how so many people live, putting off their goals and dreams and postponing their life now for a future that might not exist. And I was terrified. But that terrifying moment gave me a great gift. It gave me urgency because I had been made suddenly very aware that there wasn't a guarantee on how much time we all have to identify and go after our most important goals and dreams. And that is when my view of wealth started to change. That's when I started to really understand, when I was forced to understand the truth of that statement that we all hear, that our time is our most valuable asset. Because the health situation with my dad, that may not have been avoidable. What was avoidable was the regret he had about the many, many things he hadn't done yet because he thought he'd have more time. Now, my dad's story has a happy ending because luckily he did receive a heart transplant. And when he got out of the hospital a few months later and he found himself on permanent disability with a very limited income, he was literally making $716 a month. He could have done the safe thing. He could have stayed in his tiny inner city apartment close to the safety of the hospital and his doctors. But after what he went through, he knew what was at risk. He didn't want to be kept alive. He wanted to live life. So instead, he changed everything. He moved to a small beach town in Mexico. Let's get this slide up. Some of these slides are back. Sorry, guys. He moved to a small beach town in Mexico And there he learned how to sail and he swam in the Sea of Cortez and he played in chess tournaments and organized sunset dinners on the beach. And he went kayaking and mountain biking and dancing every night. And he did all kinds of other things that he had always wanted to do. But before his near death experience, he had just put those things off until someday. But he was given a second chance at his somedays and he wasn't going to waste it. Now, this is a deeply meaningful picture for me because this picture is a reminder to me that any goal, any dream, any experience that we believe is possible can become a reality. His reality could have been living in fear in his apartment by the hospital, but instead, this became his reality, swimming in the Sea of Cortez every day. Now, my dad's near death experience made a huge impression on me because after he got out of the hospital and started off on his bonus round, as he affectionately liked to call it, I suddenly had this urgency to try and figure out how to do all the things I wanted to do someday. So I made a list, and it was a great list. It had things like, I want to move to the beach someday. I want to start a graphic t-shirt company someday. I want to go skydiving someday, and a bunch of other stuff that sounded really cool to 18-year-old me, but also seemed really out of reach still. Because even though I had identified those important goals, when I looked at my list, I still had the same problems that most of us have. I didn't know where to start. I didn't have any connections. I definitely didn't have much money. And I was afraid. I was afraid of what might go wrong if I tried these things and failed. But after watching what happened to my dad, I knew that I should be more afraid of what would happen if I planned on doing those things someday and then just never got around to doing them. Because I learned a really valuable lesson from my dad about achieving our goals. I learned that someday is not a day on the calendar. And if we want to achieve our most important dreams and goals, we need to fix that. We need to create accountability. We need to put things on our calendar. So I looked at my list, and then regardless of cost or time or whatever other excuse I had, I picked actual days in the next couple of weeks or months, and I started putting those things down on my calendar as goals to see if I could figure them out. And over the next few months, something magical started to happen. I found a couple of roommates and I moved to the beach. I got my first credit card and I promptly maxed it out to start my graphic t-shirt company. And I recruited 3 of my more adventurous friends. We saved up for a month and we went skydiving. Now, I know these might not seem like huge goals to everyone else, but they mattered to me because they taught me that I could identify and take action on my most important dreams and goals. And they taught me that I could take my some days and put them on the calendar. And they weren't all successes by any means, but that's the point because even the things that went wrong still had value. The roommates, they only lasted 8 months, but I'd already made it to the beach. So I found new and even better roommates, and I stayed there for 5 more amazing years. The t-shirt company, that lasted only a few months longer than the roommates. Turns out you're supposed to sell more shirts than you give away to your friends. But I made a lot of friends. And now I know why they shoot out free t-shirts at sporting events, because people really love free t-shirts. So it was a lot of fun, and I eventually even managed to pay off my credit card. Skydiving, however, was a huge win. The vivid details of that experience are something that I'll cherish forever. I still remember it like it was yesterday. The butterflies in my stomach as we moved toward the opening, the adrenaline pumping as I grabbed onto the door frame for that one last pull, the feeling of tumbling into the air with the wind on my face and the noise of it all rushing by as I free fell through open space for 60 seconds. 60 seconds that, by the way, felt like 10 minutes. That was literally decades ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. And I'm still very close with all the friends that I shared that experience with. Now, although all 3 of those experiences I had varying levels of difficulty or success, they all had one thing in common. They gave me the confidence to keep taking action towards my goals, no matter how new or scary or difficult those things seemed, because I began to realize that the value wasn't in the outcome, it was in the effort. So over the next few years, between my glamorous jobs, waiting tables and bartending, I just kept squeezing in every moment I could with new experiences. I organized road trips and camped in beautiful places like Big Sur and Catalina Island and Lake Powell, where I learned how to cliff dive. I fell in love with the water during my time at the beach, and I took free diving classes where I learned how to hold my breath for 3 minutes, which came in handy when I started bringing groups of friends down to Mexico to visit my dad, and we all learned how to spearfish. And it also came in handy when I fell in love with surfing, because that's not actually me. This is me. And my surfing hasn't improved a lot since this picture, but my breath holding, luckily, is still pretty amazing. I had always wanted to learn how to cook, so I had my mom teach me how to make some old family recipes, and I fell in love with cooking. I took a motorcycle safety course, and I learned how to ride a motorcycle and got my motorcycle license. I also learned that you can still crash a motorcycle even after you take a motorcycle safety course. Luckily, don't worry, I was wearing a helmet. Unluckily, I landed right on my butt, and they don't even make a helmet for that. And then one really big one that I did was that I had always wanted to try stand-up comedy. So me and a friend signed up for an open mic night. And before we got on stage, our nerves were through the roof. I wasn't sure if I wanted to vomit or run away or drink 3 shots of tequila. But we were both there. And if he was going to get up and do it, well, so was I. So I mustered up the courage. I chose the tequila and I got up on that stage. And luckily, we weren't terrible and people laughed at most of our jokes. Now, I know what you're thinking. And yes, they were better jokes than most of the jokes you've heard so far today. And I think it probably helped that I made sure a lot of the people listening had some tequila too. I'm not suggesting you all start drinking tequila. It's only 10 a.m., but I won't judge. Now, most of those things I did didn't cost much money. They just took time. Time that I probably would have wasted if I hadn't been given that gift of urgency. Now, I told you in the beginning that our experiences are directly related to success in all areas of our lives. But I'll be honest, at the time, even though these things were adding value to my personal life, I didn't really see any value that they had beyond that. But I was creating great memories, I was helping other people create great memories, and I was mostly happy, even if I wasn't getting any richer financially or finding success in the traditional sense. But the more new things I did, the more new people I met. And many of those people turned into really meaningful relationships. Now, we all know that it's through our shared experiences that we form those really strong bonds. And it doesn't matter if it's like a cooking class or a game night, or maybe it's just a hike or a camping trip or a workout class or a quick weekend in Vegas. Anytime we share a new and interesting experience, that's where we get that feeling of connection and belonging. And when we have that feeling of connection and belonging, we start sharing our goals and dreams with one another. And when we share our goals and dreams with each other, it becomes possible for us to help one another achieve those goals and dreams. And that's how one day I got a call from one of my friends asking me if I wanted to try starting another t-shirt company. I had helped him achieve one of his big personal goals the year before. And during that process, I had shared that I still had the dream of having a successful graphic t-shirt company. But when he asked me, I had to tell him, I don't actually have any experience for running a business. And it didn't go so well last time. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, I think you'll figure it out. He didn't see the value in my business experience, but my life resume showed that I wasn't afraid to try and figure out how to get new and difficult things accomplished. And those were things that he thought would be valuable in business. So we went ahead and rented a small garage, and I started a graphic t-shirt company for the second time in my life. And it was fun for the second time in my life. And I gave away more shirts than we sold for the second time. Should have saw that coming. And the business was failing for the second time. But this time, before it failed, we figured out how to turn that 2-person graphic t-shirt company into a successful shipping and warehousing business with over 100 employees. Together, we figured it out. Because there's 2 really important things I want to highlight about this particular moment in time. First, if I never moved to the beach way back when, this business doesn't exist. If I never tried to start the first t-shirt company that failed, this business doesn't exist. If I didn't meet all those different people along the way through all those shared experiences, this business doesn't exist. And if I hadn't shared my goals and dreams with those friends, if we hadn't tried to help each other achieve our goals and dreams, this business doesn't exist. This business only existed because I was identifying goals and taking action. And every step I took, whether they were successful or not, gave me more new perspective, and it created more momentum, and it opened up more opportunities. And even the business itself that started out as a different business, but created an unexpected opportunity, we only saw that once we had that new perspective. And I never would have seen that opportunity if I wasn't already in motion. But the second thing about this picture right here, this moment in time, is that this is actually where my view of wealth started to shift even more. Because right around that time that we hit that milestone, 100 employees, I looked up and realized that 10 years of my life had gone by since we started that business. And however proud I was of building that company, somewhere along the way, I had lost that urgency. And my job had really become the only thing I did. Not only had I stopped chasing my goals and dreams, I had stopped doing all the things that I already knew I loved doing. I couldn't remember the last time I had been in the water. I had stopped cooking because it was easier to order takeout. My motorcycle sat collecting dust in a corner of my driveway. And because all I was doing was working all the time, my mental health, my physical health, and all of my relationships were suffering, including my marriage. And it felt so ironic. I had become financially independent for the first time ever, but my life felt bankrupt. And over the next few months, things continued to spiral into a typical country western song. My wife and I divorced, my dog died, and after 10 plus amazing years, my dad's bonus round came to an end and he passed away. And at my dad's funeral, all those memories from his near death experience came rushing back. And I remembered back then how those feelings of urgency I had changed how I approached life. And I remembered how happy I was watching my dad get a second chance and live this remarkably different second life. And as I sat there listening to all the funny and heartfelt stories from all those wonderful friends he had made in Mexico, that's when it struck me. When he went down to Mexico, he didn't know a single person. He had never even been to Mexico. But through his experiences, he had forged some of the greatest memories of his life with people who became some of the greatest friends in his lifetime. That's how different we can make our own lives. That's how powerful choosing our some days and chasing our dreams can be. And that really made me think about my life. So when I got home that night after all those years, I sat down and I wrote out a new list of all the things that I still wanted to do someday. And it was another great list. But you know what wasn't on that list? There wasn't a sit at my desk for 80 hours a week on that list. There wasn't a miss my niece and nephew's birthdays because I'm busy. There wasn't a stop seeing my friends because I'm too tired and it's easier to sit at home and scroll Netflix on that list. There wasn't a visit my mom only once a year, even though she's 70 and she only lives a couple hours away. And there definitely wasn't a stop doing all the things that gave me joy on that list. What was on the list was things like go on a motorcycle road trip, become fluent in Spanish, take my mom on a family vacation, organize a reunion with my old friends, see the northern lights, spend more time in nature, take some guitar lessons, start meditating, go to Italy, write a book, start a charity. It was a great list. And unlike my 18-year-old self, when I looked at my list this time, I knew from experience that I could actually probably do all of those things if I just started planning them. But one of the things on that list was really jumping off the page at me. Now, in my dad's final days, one of the things that he had talked the most about and had been most proud of was the charity that he and a friend had started down in Mexico with only $100 that grew into an organization that by the time he passed had already helped hundreds of underprivileged children get all the way through university. My dad, who was only making $716 a month, was able to do something that helped hundreds of people just by taking action. He knew that $100 by itself wasn't going to change the world, but he knew that waiting wouldn't do anything at all because he had already tried that for his entire life. So he decided to try. And just by trying, he created a ripple effect because that inspired others to take action and try. And together, they created something much bigger than themselves, something that made a real difference in the world. And that's what gave me that sense of urgency again. Because if my dad could do that on permanent disability, I thought, what am I waiting for? And what would happen if I tried? And that's when I started putting my some days back on the calendar again. And the first thing I decided to try was start a charity. But since I had no idea how to start a charity, the company I started was a graphic t-shirt company. But this one would work with charities. And I couldn't give away shirts if the money was for charity. And starting that company turned out to be one of the best decisions in my life because over the next year, I wound up getting to travel the world and do things like provide clean water for communities in Haiti. I got to work with victims of human trafficking in Indonesia, and I got to build schools for children in need in Guatemala. And those experiences helping others, those were some of the greatest experiences in my life. And even though there were no mansions and yachts in those experiences, they were still valuable in ways far beyond this guy's wildest dreams. And I think it's pretty safe to say that he had some wild dreams. But little did I know that those experiences were also going to lead to even bigger and better opportunities, as well as two of the most important relationships in my entire life, my wife, Yasmin, and the one and only Bridget Hilton, my business partner.
Hey guys. So when Joe and I met, we instantly felt like family, probably in part because we both came from very humble beginnings. So let me start there. I grew up in Flint, Michigan, a place famous for the auto industry, Michael Moore movies, and a water crisis. But as a kid, I wanted to be a different kind of famous. It was there that my love for music and my dream of working in entertainment began, offering a glimmer of hope for a different kind of future. And music wasn't just background noise for me, it was my best friend as a kid. Every day, I listened to the radio nonstop. I knew every lyric, every chord change, and every fact about the bands. And each night, I stared up at the posters on my ceiling as I dreamed of touring the globe and hanging out with rock stars. And my favorite movie, Almost Famous, made it seem like a pretty awesome lifestyle. So I registered my email as rockstarwannabe at AOL.com, and I was on my way to superstardom, or so I thought. There was only a few problems. I knew exactly zero people who'd done anything in the entertainment business. Everyone said I was being unrealistic, and I lived in a place that wasn't exactly conducive to the dream. So I embarked on my rock and roll fantasy at age 14. I took every get your foot in the door job imaginable. I distributed thousands of flyers. I fetched coffee at radio stations. I sold band t-shirts out of vans, and I worked security at a venue. I even skipped my high school prom to clean up trash at Lollapalooza for $5 an hour. Also, no one asked me to go, but this story isn't about that. And after 5 years, those efforts finally paid off. I didn't become a rich rock star, but I did land a job at a record label in Detroit, earning a life-changing $20,000 a year. And at the time, I was living in my car and on my friends' couches. So to 19-year-old me, $20,000 sounded like winning the lottery. And the moment that I got that news was the first time I realized that my daydreams could actually become reality if I just took small steps towards a big goal. And my job started with licking stamps and taping boxes in the mailroom, but unfortunately ended with our office getting shut down and everybody getting laid off. So just when I had reached a point where I could survive, my dream job had ended. But it ended up being the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know it yet. Because as I searched for jobs for months, my unemployment was coming to an end. So I made a Hail Mary and spent my last $100 on a one-way, two-stop, middle-seat Spirit Airlines ticket to Los Angeles, which was actually the only time a Spirit Airlines ticket was ever worth it, because I ended up getting a job as an assistant at the biggest record label in the world. And my tasks there included driving Taylor Swift around to meet local radio stations, going to happy hour with Rihanna at TGI Fridays, making a birthday cake for Ella Cool J, and being on the receiving end of an office eviction notice after a particularly loud visit from Kanye West. My bosses were executives with company credit cards that let me tag along to the Grammys, to movie premieres and parties in the Hollywood Hills. And as an added bonus to following my passion, I was surrounded by coworkers who inspired me, energized me, and made me feel part of a community. And to this day, those people are still some of my closest friends because of all the experiences that we shared. So I could have never dreamed of any of this had I stayed in my comfort zone. I was still broke, but now I can see that truly anything was possible. And over the next few years, I got to work on hundreds of records. I got the true sex, drugs, and rock and roll experience that I dreamed of, but with a little bit more Microsoft Excel and cubicles than I had previously anticipated. And one day at my office, I came across a viral YouTube video. It was of a 29-year-old woman named Sloan who was able to hear for the very first time thanks to a special kind of hearing aid. Sloan's experience was powerful. And it's obvious to the millions of people who saw the video that it was life-changing for her, but its power didn't stop there. It created a ripple effect. Because when I saw that video, it got me thinking about how different my life would have been without sound. And it gave me an idea. I sent the video to Joe, who was helping build schools in Guatemala at the time. He was the only person I knew that was involved in charity work. So Joe watched the video and listened to my idea to start a brand that would sell headphones and speakers and use the proceeds to help giving hearing aids to people in need, just like in the video we saw. It would be the world's first social good electronics company. He jumped on board instantly, and we high-fived in lieu of a more formal business agreement. I went home and put in my 2 weeks notice and cashed out my life savings. My 401k from Universal Music Group had accumulated a whopping $5,000. Look out, Bose. I know. It turns out working with superstars doesn't mean that you have the bank account of one. So 2 weeks later, we jumped on a plane to China without a plan or really any idea on how the electronics industry worked to source products for our new social enterprise, which we called Listen. We filled my apartment with as much inventory we could buy, handmade our own packaging from the local craft store, created the first draft of our website, and prayed to every god out there. And just 4 years later, we sold to Apple for $3 billion. Oh, wait, that wasn't us. That was actually Dr. Dre and Beats. This isn't our company's office. This was. Joe's desk was a cardboard box. And eventually, we did get real desks and less ugly couches, but this is not a rags to riches story about making billions of dollars from selling headphones. But it is a different kind of rags to riches story. Because almost a year after seeing that video of Sloan and dreaming about doing the same thing, Joe and I found ourselves in a school in Peru with a young girl named Maria. Her parents told us that it was her biggest dream in life to be able to hear so she could fit in and communicate with the other kids. But they had struggled for years to get her the proper help. So they had heard of our mission from a relative who had seen it on the local news and thought, this could be our chance. And they traveled from a village hundreds of miles away just by bus just to meet us. And she sat down in the hard plastic chair in front of us, and she was nervous and full of anxiety and hope. I was in charge of fitting her hearing aids, and I gently pushed one into each of her ears. And what happened next was just one of those moments in life that burst the seams. Maria's eyes went wide, and then a look of pure wonder flashed across her face. She could hear. Her parents cried as they collapsed on the floor in relief, and so did we. Because what had started off as this far-fetched dream just a year prior to this had turned into the closest thing to a miracle that Joe and I had ever seen. And after that first trip, we partnered with companies like Amazon, Spotify, and Facebook as they started to see the value in our philanthropic mission. And we helped and inspired more and more people. We connected with more people that started helping and inspiring us. We got to star in commercials by Google and Delta Airlines, and we were interviewed by the Today Show, Good Morning America, and the New York Times. We received fan letters from US presidents and Kim Kardashian, and spoke on stages with people like Sir Richard Branson and Trevor Noah. Our headphones were being used all around the world, from Kenya to Korea. And people even tattooed products on on their bodies. Well, one guy did, as seen there. And around that time, people I knew from all facets of my life started reaching out and saying things like, "Wow, it looks like you're killing it." And of course, "Hey, I know we haven't talked since high school, but can I borrow some money?" And I had to tell them, "No, I'm actually still living check to check because it turns out it's very expensive to live in LA." So one of the most shocking things that happened around that time is when I made it on both the Forbes and Inc. 30 under 30 lists. Because unless they met 30 people with under $30 in their bank account, there was no way I belonged there. Because as many startup founders know, the difference between what we are worth on paper and what we actually had was astronomical, off by millions of dollars at times. We were building something that we truly believed in and the happiest that we'd ever been, but we were giving away far more money than we actually paid ourselves, which is something that we happily continued to do for the next decade as money came and went, but our experiential wealth only grew. And you know what? Listen never became the biggest brand in the space. We never raised a ton of capital or sold the company. But what did happen is that we traveled to 40 countries around the world, helping to give the gift of hearing to over 50,000 individuals. We got to watch kids' eyes light up as they heard music, rain, or somebody saying, "I love you," for the first time. We didn't get technically rich, but we felt like experiential billionaires. And it would be an understatement to say that that changed the way that we viewed the world forever. And we really did get to view the world around the way. We experienced things like riding camels around the pyramids, trekking with gorillas in Rwanda, seeing the northern lights in Iceland, watching the sunrise at the Taj Mahal, sneaking into Tanzania to see cheetahs. And I'm pretty sure that one was illegal because it says right there on the sign. All those experiences expanded our mind to see what was possible, which led us to push ourselves out of our comfort zones and say yes to the things that we might have been too afraid to try before. Things like studying with samurai masters and going dog sledding, becoming beekeepers, learning to trapeze, living with monks, hunting for our own dinner, volunteering at an elephant sanctuary, and sampling local delicacies like hand-sized tarantulas, which I don't actually recommend. We also made our own wine in my garage, and from what I remember, I highly recommend that one. We were still very far away from the mansions and Ferraris of our childhood dreams, but we'd been using our time to become rich in the currency of life experiences. And that was worth more to us than any number in a bank account could ever be. Because if it failed and went away tomorrow, we were confident that we weren't going to be those people who put off investing in their life experiences and wound up with deep regrets about all the things they didn't do. And there are a lot of those people. Studies show that the number one regret that people have towards the end of their life isn't the things they did. It's all the things they never got around to doing. 3 out of 4 people feel that way. But it's not our fault. Our whole lives, we've been taught that money equals meaning, but life doesn't quite work that way. And this is a truth that we all know because when people are on their deathbeds, they don't ask to see their wallet one last time. At the funeral, you don't hear, "I loved Bob. He was wealthy." No. Bob's coworkers talk about how they loved volunteering with him at the animal shelter. His kids talk about how they went to national parks when they were young. And his wife talks about how they watched the sunset together every night. They talk about Bob's experiences. So we started asking our friends and family questions like, what have been the most valuable things in your life? And that led us to visiting retirement homes and having conversations with elderly people, asking those same questions. And their heartfelt stories only confirmed our thesis that regrets grow larger as your time grows shorter. So this is Claudia. She said that the most valuable moment in her life was the joy that she got from seeing her daughter get married to the love of her life. This is Ron. He said that the most valuable experience was following his dream to make a documentary, and that he felt like that was his legacy. And this is my grandfather. He said that the most valuable memory he had was when he road tripped through the US with my grandmother before she passed away. And those conversations inspired us to go bigger and conduct one of the largest studies ever done on life experiences, with more than 20,000 participants of all ages around the world. And according to the overwhelming results, bank accounts are not actually what people value the most in life, which is surprising because when you ask Google what valuable means, you'll see images of piles of diamonds and not working. Sorry. 1 second. Take the fan. All right. Sorry about that.
Right now.
All right. Back at it. Which is confusing because when you ask Google what valuable means, you'll see images of piles of diamonds, some weird gold eggs, and toilet paper made from $100 bills. But in our study, none of the 20,000 people responded with my diamond necklace. So according to research, valuable should look more like this: life experiences. The problem is that we know that, but we don't act like it. It's like a glitch in our psychological matrix. And that's why we wrote a book, to help people take action on their life today, not someday. Because if we want to build the most rich and rewarding lives, we need to start putting our somedays on the calendar. So, how do we do that? The first step is to figure out what you really want. And it doesn't have to be climb Mount Everest. It could be making homemade pasta, spending more time in nature, or with your kids. Or it could be at work, winning a big award for your company, or organizing a softball team for your coworkers. Whatever is most important to you. And once you figure out what you truly want, you need to figure out the steps towards the goal and put all of those on your calendar. And not just one big nebulous goal like write a book someday or lose weight. You have to start with one step: outlining ideas on what the content might be for your book, writing that first page, figuring out the title and the cover art, finding a publisher. And this is how big, ambitious experiences become a reality, even if they seem impossible at first. When I was a kid and I wanted to hang out with rock stars, I had to start with cleaning up trash. And I hope your step is way more fun than that. But we need to create momentum, and that starts with small actions. So when you think about your one big goal, think about the smallest step you can take and put that on your calendar for today. And the steps on your calendar can remind you what to do, but they can't actually make you do it. You need an accountability partner, someone who knows what your dreams are and will hold you to them. We hate to disappoint others and back out of public commitments. So just having an accountability partner boosts your likelihood of following through to 65%. And having a specific follow-up appointment with that person takes that up to 95%. So if you had a 95% chance of winning the lottery, would you play? Hell yeah, you would. So what does that look like? Sometimes it's a one-on-one relationship with someone who also wants to achieve the same thing. Could be someone you admire, could be a coach, a teacher, or a mentor. When Joe did stand-up comedy, there's no way he would have done it without having his friend doing it with him. So think about the people in your life. Maybe there's someone that can be your accountability partner on the experiences that you want to have, whether it's personally or professionally. And hopefully this will be a turning point in your life when you go from putting off your dreams to actively planning them. And if you want more proof than what you've learned here today really does lead to a fulfilling, regret-free life, you're in luck, because Joe has one more story to share. And it was the ultimate test of everything we believe, say, and do.
All right. Now, hopefully, you guys can see how, we share our stories not because they're about us, it's really about you. And hopefully you can see how throughout those stories, those steps Bridget just outlined, those worked in our lives to allow us to achieve things. And it's not just about us, it's about how achieving our own biggest dreams and goals isn't a selfish act because that actually creates value around us. But I want to actually change it up a bit because we're going to talk about regret. And I'm going to use my wife's story to really share how this hits home. And this isn't about fear. I want to make sure everyone understands it's not about fear. It's about living your life in a way where you're using your time so that you don't have fear, so that you're not afraid and you don't have future regrets. So let me start off by telling you a little bit about my wife's cancer journey. When I met my wife, first of all, she was living in London. So it was a really long distance relationship right from the start. Luckily, we both loved to travel. And since there were only limited times that we could actually see each other, we were really intentional about making those visits into memorable experiences. Our first Christmas together, we actually backpacked through Thailand. The following summer, we did a 10-day road trip through Tuscany. The next year, we ventured all the way up to the Arctic Circle in Norway, where we stayed in traditional tents and chased the northern lights. Now, I know I said in the beginning that this isn't about travel and adventure, but those are the things that we love. And even though it was usually difficult and hard to plan and pull off, we made sure to prioritize those things. So when we got married, since our friends and families lived on opposite sides of the planet, we decided to choose somewhere that was equally inconvenient for everyone. So we chose Bali. We figured that for those that were willing to make the trek, it would be a once in a lifetime experience. And for those that didn't, it would make our wedding that much cheaper. So we sent out 100 invitations, assuming a lot of people wouldn't make it. And it turns out Bali's on a lot of people's bucket list because 96 of those people showed up. But it was worth every penny. Watching our friends and families bond while they spent 2 weeks together in paradise, hiking volcanoes and river rafting through jungles and riding motorbikes through scenic rice paddies on the way to remote beaches, all while surrounded by the wonderful Balinese people and their culture. I mean, it was truly a once in a lifetime experience. And over the next few years, we just kept prioritizing and putting our biggest goals and dreams on our calendars until eventually one of our biggest somedays made it to the top of the list, which was starting a family. And we were incredibly blessed to welcome our first son in 2019, and our second son came along in 2022. Now, I was still very far from owning mansions and yachts, but by chasing my dreams and goals, my life had already become much richer in other ways than this guy had ever imagined possible. And life was good for our happy little family. So a few months later, when the youngest was 3 months old, he started having trouble breastfeeding. My wife attributed it to a blocked milk duct, told me it was nothing to worry about. We happened to run into our doctor at the grocery store, though, and he encouraged her to come in and get it checked out, just to be safe. That was on a Sunday. She saw the doctor on Monday. That was followed by an ultrasound on Tuesday, a mammogram on Wednesday, and a biopsy on Thursday. Over the weekend, while we were waiting for these biopsy results to come, my wife was still absolutely sure it was nothing to be worried about. She was too young and too healthy for it to be anything serious. It was actually her 34th birthday that week. On Monday, we returned to the doctor's office, and after some small talk, the doctor sat us down and did her best to gently brace us before telling us that the can't happen to us had just happened. My wife had stage 3 breast cancer, and it was very aggressive. She started chemotherapy the very next Monday. Now, Bridget and I had just turned in the first draft of the book, making it seem so surreal and ironic that we were being given this harsh reminder of exactly what we're trying to teach others, that life is short and uncertain, and it's important to make the most of every moment. And the period that followed was extraordinarily difficult. But as you already heard in the beginning, my wife's story has a happy ending because after 2 years of chemotherapy, radiation, immunotherapy, and a double mastectomy, my wife is now officially cancer-free. And it's hard to describe the weight that was lifted at that moment when we found out she was cancer-free. And I still shudder to think about what would have happened if things had gone the other way. We're very aware that we're some of the lucky ones. But when our lives were suddenly put on hold while my wife went through treatment for 2 years, one feeling that we didn't have throughout that process was regret. Because when we looked back at the decade we spent together before her diagnosis, it felt like we filled up every minute going after our important goals and creating meaningful experiences and memories. We had been intentional. We had urgency. We invested in important relationships. We tried to help other people achieve their goals. We felt like we hadn't wasted any of our time. So just like my dad, we had this close call with death. But unlike him, we didn't come out the other side with the need to start fresh and do everything differently. And our priorities and plans for the future, they remain the same too. If anything has changed, it's only how much more urgent our biggest goals and dreams have become. Things like sharing this message here with you guys today. And our message is this: our personal goals and dreams matter. Prioritizing and taking action on your biggest goals and dreams is the key to success in both life and business, because our companies, our careers, our relationships, our communities, our families, our coworkers all benefit tremendously from the value of us achieving our personal goals and becoming our best selves. Because when we're living our best lives, we do our best work and we inspire others around us to live their best lives and do their best work. We're giving them permission. And the ripple effect we create when we live like that, that can lead to limitless possibilities and potential. I mean, if we can do the things we did, remember what started out as a small t-shirt company turned into a business with over 100 employees. What started out as a dream to help one person here, one person turned into helping over 50,000 people around the world get the gift of hearing. So when you think about wealth, we hope you'll remember this. Time is our currency. And the value we create when we spend our time taking action on things that matter, the people we touch, the moments we share, the connections we make, that is what makes the world a richer place. So today, we'd like to leave with this exercise. I want you to imagine that your doctor just called and said, you only have 1 year left to live. And think about, what would you do with that 1 year? What would you absolutely insist on doing? What would you regret having never done if you had 1 year left to live? Now write those things down. I want you to pick one of those things today and figure out the smallest possible step you need to get started and actually start working on that first step today. Because we can't wait to see what value you'll create in the world when you start making someday today. Thank you, guys. That's the end of the presentation.
Oh my goodness. Wow. That was just phenomenal, Bridget and Joe. And just so you know, I've been getting pings this whole time about how wonderful and inspiring this has been. And thanks for ending on such an emotional note, because now that I'm crying, we're going to close things up.
It's a positive emotional
It
note.
is. It sure is. So thank you so much. Just wanted to say another huge thank you to both Bridget and Joe for sharing your inspiring stories with us, what you've done for the world, and I think giving us all a really great to do for the rest of the day to go figure out really what's important to us and start taking some action towards those things. So I did put Bridget and Joe's LinkedIn's in the chat so everyone can go and connect with them. I'm also going to send that out to all of the RSVPs afterwards today, along with the recording. And for anyone else on the call that is interested in other events that Talent Collective is putting on, although not as wonderful and inspiring as this one, they're going to be more focused on talent acquisition and recruiting. So we have one coming up on talent density, quality of hire, and a few demos coming up that are going to be from some of the most innovative recruiting AI platforms. So keep an eye on our events. Again, thank you so much to Bridget and Joe. Can't wait to see all of the amazing things that you both continue to do, and can't wait to read your book as well.
Thank
Hope
you so
everyone has a
much. And
great,
please reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes,
amazing.
absolutely. And I just want to make sure everyone knows that we have a lot of free exercises and workbooks on the website, and there's a lot of stuff where people can get started for free and just figure out things to do to make their world a little bit better.
I'll link that in the email that I sent out as well. So thanks to you both.
Thanks
Hope
for
everyone
having
has a
us.
great day.
Thank you so much, Krista.
Bye-bye.